The engines of the Azure Voyager hummed like a slumbering beast as it drifted through the vastness of space. Another cargo freighter lost in the endless sea of the cosmos. Within its metal belly, among the dull clang of tools and the static hiss of calm chatter, moved a figure who did not belong. Selira had always been a shadow, slipping through corridors unnoticed, her willowy frame bent beneath the weight of expectation. She was Quinari, one of the countless alien servants bred for labor aboard human vessels. With slate-gray skin, bioluminescent veins pulsing faintly beneath the surface, and wide violet eyes that shimmered in dim light, she was an unmistakable member of her kind, one designed to obey. She carried a crate of spare engine coils, her long fingers trembling under the weight. The freighter's chief engineer, a burly man named Hollis, sneered as she struggled. "Faster, glowworm," he grunted, barely glancing at her. "Cargo ain't gonna sort itself." Selira lowered her gaze and quickened her pace. She had learned long ago that arguing was pointless. The humans who ran this ship saw her as little more than a tool, a silent, disposable asset, useful only for lifting, cleaning, and fetching. But inside her heart, a fire flickered. Beyond the cold steel walls of the ship, beyond the menial tasks she was given, she dreamed of something greater. She dreamed of sitting in the pilot's chair, of feeling the thrusters ignite beneath her, of charting her own course through the stars. She had watched, studied, memorized every maneuver the human pilots executed. She knew how to fly. She felt it in her bones. But a Quinari servant dreaming of such things was foolishness. And yet, as fate would have it, she was not the only dreamer aboard the Azure Voyager. Jake Mercer was an anomaly among his crew, a man who, despite years in the void, had not yet been stripped of his humanity. A mechanic by trade, he spent more time elbow-deep in engine grease than he did among his fellow crewmen. He didn't much care for the way they treated the Quinari, but speaking up would do him no favors. Instead, he helped in the quiet ways he could. A leftover meal here, a few kind words there. One evening, as he finished repairs in the secondary hangar, he noticed Selira standing near the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. "You ever seen a starship up close?" he asked. Selira flinched, startled that anyone was addressing her. When she turned, her glowing violet eyes met his. "I," she hesitated. Speaking with humans beyond answering orders was unusual. Only from afar. Jake wiped his hands on his rack. "You ever been in a cockpit?" Her fingers tightened around the cleaning cloth she held. "No," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the spare shuttle in the hangar bay. "Come on. I won't tell if you won't." Her heart pounded as she followed him into the craft. The moment she stepped inside, she felt something deep and unshakable, a sense of belonging. Jake slid into the pilot's chair and gestured for her to sit in the co-pilot's seat. Hesitantly, she did. The controls spread before her like an unfinished melody waiting for a musician's touch. "You ever wanted to fly?" he asked. Selira exhaled, struggling with the weight of her own desires. "Yes," she admitted. "More than anything." Jake leaned back and gave her a crooked grin. "Then let's get you started." For the next several weeks, under the cover of artificial night, Jake taught Selira everything he knew. In secret, they met in the unused hangar, where he walked her through the mechanics of piloting, the intricacies of navigation, and the unspoken rules of space travel. She was a quick study. Too quick. It unnerved Jake at first, the way she seemed to feel the ship, as if it were an extension of herself. The Quinari were not known for their intelligence, at least, that's what the humans claimed. But Selira absorbed knowledge like a black hole, her mind an insatiable force. One evening, as she expertly maneuvered the training shuttle through a simulated asteroid field, Jake let out a low whistle. "Damn, Selira, you sure you've never done this before?" She smiled, a small, hesitant thing. "Not with my hands," she admitted. "But in my mind, 1,000 times." Jake leaned back, folding his arms. "Well, I'll be damned. You were born for this." Her expression faltered, and she turned away. "It doesn't matter," she said. "The crew would never allow it." His jaw tightened. They don't have to know. Not yet. She gave him a searching look, something unspoken passing between them. Trust, fear, hope, and something else. Something she didn't yet understand. The illusion of secrecy shattered one fateful night. Hollis had been drinking. When he stumbled into the hangar, he did not expect to find a Quinari seated in the pilot's chair, her fingers expertly gliding over the controls. What in the void? Selira froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Jake stood abruptly, placing himself between her and the engineer. Hollis' face twisted with rage. You've been teaching it? Jake clenched his fists. She's got talent. She's a servant, Hollis spat. And you? What? You think you can make a real pilot out of her? Out of that? Selira's pulse pounded in her ears. It was happening. Her dreams, her lessons, everything, falling apart in an instant. But then, for the first time, she spoke without hesitation. I am more than what you think I am. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Jake looked at her with something like awe. Hollis' lip curled. You don't get to decide that. He reached for his communicator. The captain's gonna hear about this. Selira moved before she had time to think. A quick, sharp motion, her hands striking his wrist, sending the communicator clattering to the floor. Hollis' face darkened. Oh, you've really done it now. He lunged. Jake grabbed his arm before he could strike her. Run, he said. Now. Selira didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the hangar bay, heart hammering against her ribs. The alarm would be raised soon. She had no illusions. Once the crew knew, she would be dealt with. There was only one way out. The shuttle. She reached the cockpit, fingers flying over the controls, breath coming in short gasps. The ship roared to life beneath her touch. For the first time, she was not just dreaming of flying. She was. And she was never going back. The hangar's alarm blared, an urgent pulse of red light flashing across the metal walls. Selira's hands moved on instinct, flipping switches, engaging thrusters, setting the ship for launch. This was not a training simulation. This was real. Selira, stop. Jake's voice crackled over the comms, breathless. She hesitated, her hands gripping the controls. I can't, she whispered. You can, but not alone, he said. You need me. She turned, eyes flicking to the hangar doors. Crew members were pouring in, weapons raised, shouting orders. Hollis was already barking at the security officers, pointing at the shuttle like it was a live bomb. They would never let her go. Jake was running toward the ship, dodging past the guards. One of them grabbed him, but he twisted free, his body moving like a man who had been in 2 minibar fights. Another reached for a stun baton. Selira made her choice. The ship's engines roared to life. She lifted it off the ground, just enough to send a wave of force outward, knocking several of the crew off their feet. The hangar doors were still closed. If she didn't time this right, she'd either be trapped or turned into space dust. Jake was almost at the ramp. Selira extended the landing struts just enough, giving him something to grab onto. He jumped, fingers scraping metal, then pulled himself up, rolling into the side compartment just as stun blasts pinged against the hull. I'm in, he shouted. Get us the hell out of here. She was already moving. With a deep breath, she engaged the forward thrusters, sending the shuttle rocketing toward the hangar doors. Hollis' voice erupted over the comms. Stand down, or we'll blow you out of the sky. Selira ignored him. Her fingers danced across the console, overriding the door controls. The massive steel barriers groaned, splitting open just enough to reveal the endless void beyond. Jake stumbled into the cockpit, panting. We're not gonna make it. Yes, we are. Selira pushed the thrusters to full burn. The shuttle shot forward, slipping through the narrowing gap as warning sirens shrieked. Behind them, the ship's automated defenses came online, turrets adjusting, locking onto them. A missile alert flashed on the screen. Selira's breath caught. No, not like this. She felt the ship around her. The pulse of the engines, the subtle shifts in balance, the gravitational forces curling around them like unseen hands. It was second nature, like breathing. She angled the shuttle sharply downward, barely skimming the freighter's hull. The missile tracking them recalibrated, struggling to compensate for the sudden movement. Then, at the last possible second, she rolled the ship sideways and cut the main thrusters completely. The missile screamed past them, unable to adjust. The explosion lit up the void behind them, rocking the Azure Voyager with a force that sent it spiraling off course. Selira's hands flew over the controls, re-engaging the thrusters. The shuttle jolted forward, breaking free of the ship's gravitational influence. The stars stretched before her, open, endless. They had escaped. She let out a shaky breath, her fingers still curled around the controls. Jake let out a low, incredulous laugh. "Holy shit," he muttered. "You're really something, Glow Girl." Selira turned to look at him, her violet eyes gleaming. "I told you," she said softly. "I was born for this." They didn't have long before pursuit ships were launched. The Azure Voyager had just lost a shuttle, and the captain wouldn't let that go unanswered. Jake slid into the co-pilot seat, pulling up the star charts. "We need to jump to hyperspace now, before they send half the damn fleet after us." Selira's hands moved quickly over the console. "We can't jump without clearing their sensor range. If they track our trajectory, they'll know exactly where we're going." He muttered a curse. "Then we need a diversion." Selira's mind raced. They had a standard-issue cargo shuttle, not a warship, not even a scout vessel. Their weapons were non-existent, their defenses minimal. If a fighter squadron caught up to them, they were dead. She scanned the nearby sector, looking for anything that could give them an edge. There, an asteroid field, 2,000 kilometers ahead. Jake followed her gaze. "You're kidding." "I'm not. That's a death trap. It's also our best chance." He exhaled sharply, then nodded. "All right, Glow Girl. Show me what you got." Selira angled the ship toward the asteroid belt, increasing speed. Behind them, long-range sensors picked up incoming pursuit signals. The Azure Voyager had deployed 3 fighters. Fast, armed, and merciless. She swallowed her fear and pushed the engines to their limit. The asteroids loomed ahead. Massive hunks of space rock tumbling through the void, colliding and shattering in an endless, chaotic ballet. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they would be reduced to debris. Selira didn't hesitate. She slipped between the first asteroid, banking hard to avoid a jagged outcrop. The ship trembled under the strain, but she adjusted instantly, compensating for gravitational shifts. Jake grabbed the edges of his seat. "I take back what I said. You weren't born for this, you were built for it." The first fighter entered the field behind them, its pilot struggling to keep up. Selira watched its movements, waiting, calculating. Then, at the precise moment the fighter tried to flank them, she spun the ship sideways and cut the main thrusters again. Just for a second. The sudden deceleration sent the fighter lurching forward, directly into an oncoming asteroid. The explosion was instant. Jake let out a disbelieving laugh. "Did you just—" "2 more," Selira said, focusing. "We're not safe yet." She weaved through the chaos, letting instinct take over. The second fighter tried to match her movements, but it couldn't keep up with her unpredictability. When she saw an opening, she dove straight down, toward the densest part of the field. The fighter hesitated. Too late. A massive asteroid swung into its path, colliding with a force that sent debris scattering in all directions. The last pilot didn't make the same mistake. He stayed back, tracking them, waiting for them to slip up. Selira narrowed her eyes. Then, she saw it. An unstable asteroid, its core still molten, on the verge of splitting. She adjusted her trajectory, flying straight toward it. Jake's eyes widened. "Selira, trust me." At the last moment, she rolled the ship and squeezed through the narrowest gap between the fractured rock. The fighter tried to follow. The asteroid exploded. The shockwaves sent their ship spinning, but Selira fought for control, regaining balance just as they reached the far edge of the field. Silence filled the cockpit. Jake turned to her, still gripping his seat. "That was the dumbest, craziest, most impossible thing I've ever seen." Selira's lips curled into the smallest of smiles. "But it worked." His laughter echoed through the ship. She took a deep breath and reached for the hyperdrive controls. "Where to?" Jake asked. Selira gazed at the endless stars before her. Anywhere, she said. With a final flick of her wrist, she pushed the lever forward, and the stars stretched into infinity. The shuttle lurched forward, the fabric of space bending as the stars stretched into brilliant lines of white. The familiar hum of the hyperdrive settled into a steady rhythm, and for the first time since the escape, the tension in Selira's shoulders eased. They were free. Jake exhaled a long breath, sinking back into his seat. "Damn, glow girl," he muttered, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "I don't know what's crazier, the fact that we pulled that off or the fact that I'm still alive to talk about it." Selira's fingers finally loosened on the controls. She turned to him, her bioluminescent veins pulsing faintly in the dim cockpit light. "We're not safe yet." Jake smirked. "I was hoping for at least 5 minutes of optimism." Selira shook her head, studying the navigation readout. Their course was erratic, deliberately unplotted. A random jump to throw off pursuers. But she knew better than to trust blind luck. "Where does this trajectory lead?" she asked. Jake leaned forward, tapping at the NAV display. "Looks like..." His expression darkened. "Oh, hell." Selira narrowed her eyes. "What?" Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. "We're heading toward the drift." Her heart skipped a beat. She had heard the stories. The drift was a lawless void, a sector of unclaimed space where fugitives, mercenaries, and outcasts gathered, a place where the civilized galaxy dared not tread. And now, it was their only refuge. Chapter 8. The Price of Freedom. The shuttle exited hyperspace on the outskirts of the drift. What lay before them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A scattered graveyard of ships drifted aimlessly, wrecks of once mighty vessels, their hulls pockmarked by battle scars, their skeletons illuminated by the flickering glow of malfunctioning lights. Among them, stations of various sizes clung to existence, cobbled together from scavenged parts, forming a chaotic network of floating sanctuaries and dens of crime. Selira's hands tightened on the controls. "Are you sure this is better than being dead?" Jake chuckled darkly. "The jury's still out on that one." A proximity alert flashed. "Ah, hell," Jake muttered. "We've got company." A trio of ugly, patched-together fighters detached from a nearby derelict and arced toward them. "Incoming hail." Selira hesitated, but Jake leaned forward and accepted the transmission. A rough voice, laced with static, growled through the comms. "Unregistered vessel, you're in drift space. State your business." Selira glanced at Jake. He cracked his knuckles, then responded smoothly. "Just travelers looking for a place to lay low." A pause. Then, a laugh. Harsh, guttural. "Ain't no such thing as just travelers in the drift." Selira's heart pounded. The comms crackled again. "Follow our coordinates. Any sudden moves, and you'll be floating home in pieces." Jake sighed. "Well, that's a warm welcome." Selira frowned. "This could be a trap." Jake grinned. "Oh, it's definitely a trap." She swallowed hard but adjusted their course. They had no choice. The fighters escorted them to a station unlike any Selira had ever seen. A massive hulk of a structure, made from salvaged freighters and gutted warships, held together by greed and desperation. Neon lights flickered, advertising services that ranged from weapons trading to black market cybernetics. The docking bays swarmed with figures of every species imaginable. Pirates, smugglers, killers, and now, 2 fugitives. As they landed, Jake turned to Selira. "All right, here's the deal. Keep your head down. Let me do the talking." Selira nodded, but her pulse quickened. Everything about this place screamed danger. The docking ramp lowered. A figure was waiting for them. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and human, her arms cybernetically enhanced with mechanical plating. A long scar ran down her cheek, and her cold blue eyes sized them up like a butcher inspecting meat. "Jake Mercer," she drawled, crossing her arms. "Didn't think I'd see your sorry ass again." Jake winced. Hey, Captain Vena. Long time." Selira tensed. This was his contact? Vena's gaze slid to Selira. "And what's this?" She smirked. "A Quinari? Didn't peg you as a slaver, Jake." Selira bristled. Jake quickly stepped between them. "She's not property. She's with me." Vena's smirk widened. That's so? Well, if you two are running from something, I imagine you'll be needing protection. Jake exhaled. I was hoping we could work something out. Vena tilted her head. Depends. What have you got to offer? Jake hesitated. Then, he pointed to Selira. She can fly. Selira's breath caught. Vena's gaze sharpened. That right? Jake nodded. Better than anyone I've ever seen. Vena studied Selira, then chuckled. Well, a Quinari pilot. Now that's a rare find. Selira's heart pounded. This was it. A test. A chance. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something more. Selira stood rigid under Captain Vena's scrutinizing gaze. The station's artificial lighting cast jagged shadows across the docking bay, and the scent of burning metal and stale air clung to everything. A Quinari pilot, Vena mused, lips curling into a smirk. That's something you don't see every cycle. Selira swallowed hard but held her ground. Her bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly beneath her slate-gray skin, betraying her unease. Jake stepped in. Listen, Vena. We need a place to lay low. In exchange, Selira here can fly for you. You need a good pilot? She's the best you'll ever get. Vena's smirk widened. Big words, Mercer. And here I thought you'd never try to sell me anything but broken engines and bad excuses. Jake shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't offer if I wasn't serious. Vena rolled her neck, her cybernetic arm whirring softly. Then she turned to Selira. Tell me, Glow Girl, how do I know you're not full of void dust? Selira's fingers twitched. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the unspoken threat behind Vena's casual words. If she failed to impress, this would be over before it began. So she lifted her chin and met Vena's cold blue stare. Put me in a ship, she said, and I'll show you. Vena let out a bark of laughter. Oh, I like her. She turned to one of her crew, a wiry man with augmented eyes. Riggs, prep the scythe. Let's see if the Glow Girl can back up her talk. Jake shifted uneasily. Vena. Relax, Mercer, Vena said. I won't kill her if she fails. I'll just throw you both out the airlock. Jake muttered a curse under his breath. Selira, however, simply nodded. She had faced death before. This was nothing new. Vena's crew led them through the maze of welded corridors until they reached a secondary hangar. Inside, resting on hydraulic lifts, was a sleek, predatory vessel, the Scythe. Unlike the patched-together wrecks that made up most of the Drift's fleet, this ship was a masterpiece. Twin ion thrusters, razor-thin wings, a chassis reinforced with obsidian plating, a true pilot's machine. Selira could barely breathe. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Vena folded her arms. She's fast, but temperamental. She's got quirks. You'll have 5 minutes in open space to prove you can handle her. Selira stepped forward. That's all I need. Jake grabbed her arm, his voice low. Selira, are you sure? She turned to him, eyes shimmering. I was born for this. Jake exhaled. Then go make them believe it. The cockpit of the Scythe wrapped around her like a second skin. The controls were more responsive than anything she'd ever touched, humming under her fingertips, waiting for her command. She could feel the ship. The docking clamps released, and the moment her fingers touched the throttle, she was gone. The station fell away as the Scythe streaked into the void, thrusters igniting with a snarl of blue fire. The acceleration pressed Selira into the pilot's chair, but she adjusted instantly, her body moving with the ship as if they were one. She twisted the controls, sending the Scythe into a rolling dive before pulling up in a sharp arc. The ship responded like a blade through air. Razor-sharp, hungry. The Drift's asteroid field loomed ahead. A treacherous maze of spinning rock and debris. A test of true skill. Selira grinned. She dove in. From the station, Jake, Vena, and her crew watched on a holoscreen as Selira weaved the Scythe through the shifting maze of asteroids with inhuman precision. One of Vena's men let out a low whistle. Damn, she's got no business flying like that. Vena's smirk had faded. She leaned forward, watching every move. No, she doesn't. Jake only smiled. Selira's movements weren't just skilled. They were unnatural. The way she anticipated the asteroid shifts, The way she twisted the ship through impossible gaps, it was as if she wasn't just flying the ship. She was listening to it, becoming it. And then, for the final stroke, she killed the engines completely. The scythe drifted weightlessly, carried only by momentum. She let it spin, calculating the perfect re-engagement point. Then, at the last possible moment, she fired the thrusters. The ship snapped out of the drift with a violent burst of speed, soaring free of the asteroid field like a phantom emerging from the dark. Selira exhaled. She had never felt more alive. When she landed back in the hangar, the silence was deafening. The crew stared at her. Even the most hardened among them seemed shaken. Their tough exteriors cracked just enough to show awe. Jake grinned. Told you she was the best. Vena stepped forward, her cybernetic fingers flexing. She studied Selira as if seeing her for the first time. Finally, she said, "Where the hell did you learn to fly like that?" Selira hesitated. If she told the truth, that she had never flown before Jake had taught her, no one would believe her. So instead, she said, "It's just who I am." Vena smirked. "That's so?" She turned to Jake. "All right, Mercer. You win this round." Then, to Selira, "You've got a seat on my crew, but I don't take in strays for free. If you're flying my ships, you're earning your keep." Selira's heart pounded. "And what does that mean?" Vena's smirk widened. "It means, Glow Girl, you're about to become a smuggler." Selira looked at Jake. He gave her a small nod. She had spent her life taking orders, being told what she could and couldn't do. Now, for the first time, she had a choice. She turned back to Vena. "I'm in." Vena chuckled. "Good. But if you're flying with us, you're not going by Selira anymore. Slaves and servants have names like that." She leaned in. "You need a pilot's name." Selira thought for a moment. She had always been the unseen one, the shadow in the corridors. But no more. From now on, she would burn bright. "Call me Nova." Jake blinked, then grinned. Vena let out a sharp laugh. "Nova it is." And just like that, the girl who had been cast aside was no longer a servant. She was a pilot. She was free. And the stars had never felt closer. Nova. The name still felt foreign on her tongue, but she clung to it like a tether in the dark. It was hers. No longer a servant's name. No longer the label of something disposable. It was a pilot's name. A name meant to soar. But now, she had to prove she could wear it. Vena wasted no time. "The first job's simple," the smuggler captain said as she led Nova and Jake through the labyrinthine corridors of the station. "We've got a delivery heading to Malker 4. Some valuable cargo. Needs a light touch and a faster ship than our usual haulers." Nova felt the unspoken weight in Vena's words. Valuable cargo, which meant dangerous. Jake, walking beside her, cleared his throat. "What's the catch?" Vena smirked. "You're thinking too much, Mercer." She tossed him a datapad. "Coordinates, access codes, and some, incentives for local security to look the other way." Nova narrowed her eyes. "And if we get caught?" Vena's cybernetic fingers tapped against the metal railing as they walked. "Then you run, Glow Girl. Fast." Nova let out a slow breath. So this was the life of a smuggler. No chains, no masters, just risk, danger, and the endless stars. She smiled. It suited her. The scythe hummed beneath Nova's fingers, her new ship, her new life. She and Jake loaded the cargo, 2 sealed crates, their contents unknown but undoubtedly illegal, into the hold before strapping into their seats. "You ready for this?" Jake asked. Nova flicked the thruster controls with a steady hand. "I was born ready." Jake chuckled. "Now that's the attitude." The ship lifted off, gliding smoothly out of the station's gravity field. Nova kept her course casual at first, pretending to be just another small trader passing through. But the moment they hit open space, she pushed the throttle. The scythe leapt forward, the stars blurring as she guided it into the void. No hesitation, no fear. She was flying. The journey to Malker 4 was smooth, until it wasn't. As they neared the planet's orbit, the comm crackled. "Unregistered vessel, this is Malker security. You are entering restricted space. State your business." Nova's hands tightened on the controls. Jake swore under his breath. They weren't supposed to be here. Nova glanced at him. Do we bribe them? Jake checked the data pad Vena had given them. I don't think these guys take bribes. Nova exhaled sharply. Then we do it the hard way. She flicked the ship's thrusters into overdrive and banked hard toward the atmosphere. Nova, Jake started, but she had already made her move. The scythe dove, cutting dangerously close to the planet's defense grid. Warning alarms blared, but Nova didn't waver. The security ships gave chase. Jake shouted, "We've got two tailing us, fast ones." Nova smiled. Then let's see if they can keep up. She twisted the controls, sending the scythe into a series of rapid spirals. The G-forces pressed down on her, but she didn't fight them. She let them flow through her, using them to guide her movements. One of the security ships hesitated. A mistake. Nova cut the engines for a fraction of a second, letting gravity pull the scythe into freefall, right before she re-engaged them at an impossible angle. The maneuver sent her ship clear of the security perimeter. The pursuers, caught off guard, overshot their chase vector. Jake hooped. Hell yes, that was insane. Nova just grinned. They tore through the skies of Malker 4, reaching the drop point in record time. Cargo delivered. Mission accomplished. Nova was officially a smuggler. One job turned into two, then three. Nova and Jake became the crew to call when something needed to be delivered fast and without notice. Her reputation grew. Pilots whispered about the Quinari who could fly like she was born of the void itself. And Vena? She kept them busy. "You've got talent, glow girl," she told Nova one night, after another flawless run. "But talent ain't enough out here. You need an edge. You need a reason." Nova tilted her head. "And what's yours?" Vena's smile was sharp. "Survival." Jake, sipping from a metal flask, chuckled. "That and profit." Vena smirked. "Same thing, Mercer." Nova didn't answer right away. What was her reason? Once, it had been simple, freedom. But now, she had more than freedom. She had a ship, a purpose, a crew, and something she had never had before. A future. Freedom, however, always comes at a cost. The Azure Voyager was still hunting them. It took months, but eventually, the captain of her old ship found them. A fleet arrived in the drift, 3 warships and a squadron of fighters, all looking for one fugitive Quinari. Hollis, her former tormentor, sent a message on open comms. "Selira," he sneered, purposefully using her old name. "You thought you could run? Your property. You belong to us." Nova's blood ran cold. Jake slammed a fist against the console. "That bastard." Vena folded her arms, watching Nova carefully. "Well, Glowgirl, what's the call?" Nova's hands tightened into fists. She had spent her life running, hiding, obeying. Not anymore. She lifted her chin. "We fight." Vena's smirk returned. "Now that's what I like to hear." The battle was chaos. The scythe twisted through the battlefield like a vengeful ghost, outflying every fighter that dared pursue her. Nova turned every advantage against them, leading enemy ships into collisions, tricking their sensors, using the battlefield itself as her weapon. She was unbeatable. And then, she saw Hollis' command ship. A chance to end this. Nova pushed the throttle to full burn, charging straight for the bridge. Hollis' voice rang over the comms. "Stand down, you worthless thing." Nova bared her teeth. She cut the engines, allowing the ship to drift as if she had lost control, just long enough for Hollis to think he had won. And then, at the last possible second, she fired everything. The command ship exploded in a blinding burst of fire and metal. The battle ended moments later. The warships retreated. The Azure Voyager was no more. And Nova? She wasn't a fugitive anymore. She was a legend. Later, as she stood on the bridge of the scythe, Jake leaned against the console beside her. "So," he said, "what now?" Nova gazed out at the endless void, her violet eyes burning with the light of 1,000 stars. She smiled. "We fly." And with that, the scythe shot forward, disappearing into the infinite horizon. The girl they cast aside was gone. Only Nova remained, and she was unstoppable.